Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Tuesday to America's Some Assembly Required. Anna Maria Reitzinger and I will be talking about the how-tos of building our American state assemblies and committees. We do have a schedule of topics and that we're working through those topics. We have moderators in the chat and we'll only take questions on the topic of the day. So as we go along week after week, we hope to address and answer your questions on building your state assembly and your committees. Today's topic is going to be, we're going to finish up the Jural Assembly committees, and it's on land patents. I know that's going to be something that everyone wants to really hear. So keep your questions to those topics, and I'm going to bring Anna on stage, and we will get started. So hello, Anna.
Hello, Lisa. I'm just getting some wonderful news from the banks.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
Yes, our prosperity unions are opening and a handful of states are already open.
Wow, awesome. Awesome. Yeah. We hope Ohio is in that group. So hopefully soon.
Yes, it's a very happy announcement. That's a good thing. A big step in the right direction. So I'm pleased to be reading that this morning.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. That is going to help so many people. It's wow. And today's topic is land patents. So all of us are chomping at the bit, right, to get our research done, get our land patent committees really active and ready to go. And when we do have access to our prosperity funds, that we can free and clear our property, get our land patents, and move forward, right?
Right. Okay, well, before we launch into the subject of land patents, we kind of need to go back and revisit a couple of things.
Okay.
One is the law of kinds. So there's a difference in law between substantive law, which means law that affects matters of substance,
people,
like people and actual land and soil, and law that is designed to address businesses and corporations, okay, which are unnatural constructs that are made by man, okay?
I know how you feel.
Yeah, well, so land can only be actually owned by living people. A corporation can hold land in trust for living people, but that's about the extent of what a corporation can actually own. So when businesses and corporations say that they own land, they don't actually own land. What they have is a trust interest in land that they've paid for.
Okay.
So there are two systems that are set up. The actual land and soil belongs to the American people and their states. It does not belong to the state of state. It does not belong to the state trust. It belongs to the actual state and the actual living people, period. Now, this is set in cement in our law. It's also set in cement under the law of kinds. Ours is a substantive law. It is not a theoretical law. It is not a legality. And so land law and soil law are different than corporate law and business law. And the only place that they have sort of a juncture or bridge between the two is the idea of a land trust, and specifically What we see in this country is a British land trust set up by the British territorial state of state organizations in the name of the state. Okay. And the basis for the existence of these land trusts is the idea that there are British territorial citizens, U.S. capital C citizens, who live in this country and who invest in land and homes like everybody else. But instead of those lands and homes belonging to them outright, because they're foreign citizens, right? Their land and homes are owned and operated by the British monarch as a trustee or as a what would you call it? Anyway, these people are wards of the state, and that means for them wards of their monarch. And so the monarch holds their land and homes in trust.
Right.
Okay. So that's the basis of these state trusts. Later, there were municipal trusts that were also set up. And those municipal trusts held land for citizens of the United States, right? So these two foreign citizenries can't actually own land, but they can use land and have a secured interest in it through a state trust. After the Civil War, the Brits came in here and they surreptitiously set up all these state of state organizations and replaced the American state of state organizations. And when they did that, they set up a state trust, a state land trust, quote unquote, for us during our absence. And they just subsumed everything. They have subsumed all of the land in the state into this trust. And then, of course, some of their people had land in that trust, but they would have been in that trust anyway. And they just arbitrarily included all our land in the state trust and conveniently didn't tell us a word about it. In fact, to this day, they try to obscure the existence of all these state trusts. Perhaps if you are sensitive to such things and you've been listening, you'll notice that there's something rather strange about the way the language is constructed around these state trusts. They never use the word trust. So you have such constructions as the Wisconsin State Capitol, the Wisconsin State University system, the Wisconsin State this, the Wisconsin State that. But if you're listening, there's a missing word there. And what it should say is trust. Okay, the Wisconsin State Trust, whatever. Okay, so all the states have had, even though it's acknowledged that the states belong to the people, right? And that the land and soil belongs to the people, that's really acknowledged throughout everything. It's all been commandeered and rat-holed in this state trust, a foreign state trust. And so what we have is a situation where since the Civil War, there have been no actual sales of land in this country. There have been transfers of titles, but there haven't been actual sales of land unless it was done privately, and then the state of state doesn't recognize it very conveniently. So what we've had since that time is a transfer of titles, as in British titles, as in Sir Sagramore and Lady Egbert, okay? And these titles are just land descriptions of various kinds. And there are many different systems that have been used to describe land. If you go back and you start looking at any land parcel that's been described, you'll find that there's a municipal land description, and that's usually in the form of a block and lot subdivision system. So you'll find your land parcel is described as, lot 14 of block 15 of Bridge Park subdivision, or it's described in terms of a street address, 1114 Mockingbird Lane, okay? Or it'll be described in terms of a utility district, P13892, plat book page number 106, or it will be described as a survey that is actually undertaken on a cadastral survey, the southeast 1/4 of the northeast 1/4 of,
Right.
Okay, so there are all these different ways that they've used to describe your land, okay? And yet none of those ways of describing your land have anything to do with you and your land. They have to do with their descriptions, their copyrighted descriptions of your land. So basically, and I discovered this myself some years ago when there was a changeover in the local government, and the local government sent out a little girl in a white car with a clipboard. And she was parked outside my house one day, and I went down to the street and I asked her what she was doing. And she says, "Oh, I'm assigning house numbers." And she was just literally walking along and going, "Oh, well, this one is going to be 2235, and this one's going to be 2390, and just totally arbitrary. And she was assigning house numbers. Now, when she went back to her employer and, provided these lists, they copyrighted all this and set it up in a system of titles that they then claim to own. Now, they don't actually have the right to mess with your property, but they do have the right to name and number and describe the public road easement running in front of your property. So when you get a bill addressed to, say, a property tax bill addressed to 4211 Mockingbird Road, that's a road service tax being applied against the public road easement in front of your property. Doesn't really have anything to do with you, but of course you think it does because you've accepted their title, right? You are identifying your property as 4211 Mockingbird Road, so you get to pay for the privilege of using their copyrighted description of your land or the public easement attached to your land. And in order to detach the public easement from your land, you have to have a separate description of your property boundary, and you have to name your land something else. You have to come up with your own name for your own land. So, two elements there. You have to have a meets and bounds and landmarked description of your land and soil recorded, and you have to rename it so that it is identifiable as something else than what they've called it. Most people are unaware of this. And as a result, They use this as a device to latch on to you and the improvements you've made on your land. You can kind of imagine the situation. You know how a road easement runs along your property line.
Yes.
So the road easement is called 2342 South Birch Road. Okay.
Right.
So they send out the tax bill for 2342 Birch Road, and you think that's your bill, right? Because it's running outside your house.
Right.
But it doesn't make it your bill. It's actually their bill that they're trying to force off on you. See, they actually owe a maintenance and not a lease on the public road easement back to the state trust. And the blighters responsible for this are benefiting on both ends of it, you see. They're getting paid for the use of your road easement that you gave them, and you're being taxed for it. So they've had a nice little system going here where they're basically taxing you for the use of your own property.
Right. So in where Doug and we bought a corner off of an 80-acre farm back almost 38 years ago. And almost 38 years ago and 39 years ago. And there's the road easement, and then we have a utility easement for a major water main that runs in the front of our property as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so but we also received, and I think people need to also understand, there are different types of deeds when you buy a piece of property. And the preferred deed that you want to your property is the warranty deed. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah, but all deeds are foreign.
Correct. Correct.
Bear that in mind.
Right.
So a foreigner is giving you the right to own your land, which you already own. And all this has to get straightened out. These state trusts have to be dissolved down so as to give back the true deed, the true land ownership to the people who live there. There'll still be a state trust for those instances where there are occasions where land does need to be held in trust.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, Joe Average should have the complete and total ownership of the land and soil in his particular state.
Right.
And so part of what we are faced with is making those claims all the way back. And the land patent is just one of numerous different things, different land descriptions or land, not titles, but I guess you could say land catalogs.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you begin with a land grant. And traditionally, the land grant was done by the King of Spain. And once the land grant was issued, it was for forever. Once it's done, it's done. So there's a land grant. Then there's a cadastral survey, like the USGS survey, or something similar. And there's a land patent. And then there's a chain of title. And a title is not a patent. It's not a cadastral survey. It's just a title. It's just a cataloging device. Okay? So here you are, and you're looking at a record of conveyances or transfers. A conveyance is a transfer. And so you're looking at the transfer of the title on a piece of property going back through multiple transactions.
Hmm.
You know, Mr. Bill sells the land to Mr. Jason. Mr. Jason sells the land to Mrs. Polk. Mrs. Polk, sells the land, on and on and on. But they're not actually selling the land. They're selling the title to the land. And so you wind up with a situation where you do a chain of title research going all the way back, and at a certain point it ends. You come to the end of all the title transfers, and then what? Well, beyond that, you have the land patent and the land grant. And you want to go all the way back to the land patent or land grant, or both, that are underlying your property and claim that. And then you want to rename the whole thing and record it.
Right.
Now, we have people in training right now to be able to do this kind of research for a fee. And then we have a new land recording system that is designed for people to make the claim for their patent and grant. So we've got another whole, I guess you could call it a land recording system that's coming online here that will make it much easier for you to post the land patent interest that you have. There hasn't been anything like that since the BLM stopped doing it circa 1965. But we have started up our own system now, and you'll be able to post your interest in land patents using this new system very soon.
Right. So what I just showed as you were speaking was I had done, Doug and I had gone to our county recorder office, and we went through and did the chain of conveyance. So just who transferred to whom. And if you seesaw your way down this list, you can see where it is. And our particular piece of property, we were the last man and woman in Butler County, Ohio, to be in the actual book of conveyances, handwritten in the book of conveyances on our county. Everything else after that date was all put into digital record. Now, they may have included ours in digital record by now. When I was up there, I had complained a couple of years ago that, we had to physically go do our record search, that we were not in the digital record. And they said at the time that they were waiting on funding to be able to do that. So, these were some of the actual entries in the book of conveyances as I traced it back through looking at what the book, the page, the number, the date, all of those things that you have to have for your chain of conveyance so that you can track those titles or deeds back down through the chain of conveyance. I also have a document where I went through and made photographs of each one of the deeds that were issued on it as well. But as you just stated, then we also have to look and go find our original land patents or land grants that were given out of the Bureau of Land Management. And we become on that unless it's family land that's been passed down and passed down and passed down, conveyed to us by our ancestors, our relatives, then we become assigns on those. It either goes to the heirs or the assigns. And the assigns means that you have a chain of conveyance that conveys that down to you from the original patent. You become an assignee of that land patent or land grant. So that's just kind of a good background for all of us to realize, and that, you know, we really need to, because they'll see us, they see us as wards of the state until our states are really standing, right? And that our assemblies are really claiming their rightful access to all of our properties, our private properties. And so once we can get our state standing, one of the things that we work on is notifying state trustees. Is that correct?
Basically, we're working on it on a more systemic basis because it was all conceived in fraud.
Okay.
So what we want is a systemic understanding that we want our state of states to be operated by the actual people of the state, not by our foreign federal subcontractors. It's not appropriate to have Brits in charge of our state of state organizations providing public services that they were never hired to provide.
Right.
And so what we want is a return of American control over American state of state functions. And we want we want the American people to have the return of their land free and clear of all encumbrances that have been established by the British government, as if we were under the false presumption that we were ever British territorial citizens. And so we're looking for a much more systemic cure to all of this. And we want a radical revisiting of the entire topic of who owns what. And it's the grubby little living people who own it all. It's not the corporations. It's not the trusts. It's not the trustees. It's not theirs. We are being presumed to be both the donors and the ultimate beneficiaries of the land of the states. But here's the problem. It's a generation skipping trust, so that you may be the presumed donor, but in your generation, you are not the beneficiary. So they basically just ignore you, and they trample on your rights in the name of preserving the rights of a future generation that may or may not even be born yet. And so it's all very bass-ackwards. It's all very crooked, and it's all very self-interested on the part of those who concocted this scheme to deprive the living Americans of their ownership right, their own land and their own property interests. So they have to be kicked out, and they have to be corrected. We basically need to take them by the scruff of the neck and say, okay, enough's enough.
Proceed on.
Proceed on. You're our employees. We're your employers, and this is the way it's going to go. And no, it's not going to be a generation skipping trust. If there's the need for a state land trust, and there are occasions where we might need a state land trust to do something, but if there's a need for a state land trust, it's not going to function in the way that you have it set up.
Right.
And let me just explain a generation skipping trust. I am in receipt of my grandfather's estate rights. I'm the beneficiary of my grandfather, not my father. My son will be the beneficiary of my father. That's how a generation skipping trust works. And they're usually used in the event that someone is irresponsible. Say that a grandfather wants to pass his land on, but his son is a hopeless drunk and gambler and would basically throw away the family fortune. Okay, so the grandfather decides to skip the son and vest the interest in the grandson. That's a generation skipping trust. And that's how they've engineered the state trusts, is if we are all such terrible wastrels and incompetents that we couldn't possibly manage our own business and make our own decisions, and that they have to come in and operate this trust on our behalf for us. But we actually have nothing to say about it here and now because it's a generation skipping trust and we've been skipped.
I see. On purpose, regularly.
Yeah, well, all this crap has to go. The British system has to go. The British courts have to go. The
Right.
pretenses that we are British citizenry has to go. The idea that we are in any way under a contractual obligation that we're unaware of, that unconscionable contracts and adhesion contracts can hold us, all of that has to go away. And so it affects our land, and we're basically discussing how it affects our land rights. But it also affects our standing in law. It affects our right to have other kinds of assets. It affects everything in a very harmful way. And all of these bar association lawyers, they're not really lawyers. They are not required to know the actual law. They are required to know policies and procedures and court rules and that sort of thing. They're basically glorified clerks, but they don't know the actual law. And, when you start talking to them about the actual law, they turn white and they shrivel up and they run away. They don't want to talk about substantive law. They want to talk about statutory law. They want to talk about code. They want to talk about regulations. And that's because they're operating either in a military format or they're operating as foreign citizenry.
Right. I once was asked for my definition of a lawyer, and as I had gone through a couple years of law for a degree I had, and I was told my answer was, well, I believe that you could describe lawyers, if I had to describe them, is they are glorified English majors.
Yeah, sneaky English majors.
Sneaky, glorified English majors, exactly. Knew how to twist words and use them, in different ways, and obscure the meaning of some things, and just glorified English majors.
Well, yeah, and attorneys literally do not have to know the law. The only one in the entire government structure who is required to know the law is the Solicitor General. The Attorney Generals don't have to know law. Isn't that interesting? And we've been bamboozled into thinking that attorneys need to know the law because they have been charged with interpreting statutory law and code. But statutory law isn't the actual law. Statutory law is merely legislation that was passed by a corporation and is supposed to be limited to regulating the activities of their own employees.
Right. That's exactly right. So, Anna, this is great to be able to give a good definition of land patents. I was going to show a real quick. So this is one of those Ohio Revised Codes records, patents, and copies and exemplifications that they use on Ohio to talk about what patents really are, and granted within this state. They're mixing their cases, and they're putting this all. It's very interesting how they've put this in.
Right. Let's read this the way that we should read it. Okay.
Okay.
Patents for lands lying within this state, not the state, this state, meaning their territorial state. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So patents for lands lying within this state granted to any person by the president, small p, of the United States, upper
Right.
lowercase. Okay. Now, if this were talking about the actual country, it would be a president with a capital P, and it would be the with a capital T, the United States. But it's not. It's not talking about the actual physical United States, the country.
Right.
It's
And it's
not
talking
talking,
about persons too, not
right,
people.
right, right. You see, it says any person. In their system, all persons are dead.
Mhm.
Okay. That's supposed to be to provide us with a clear demarcation between the living and the dead. But they messed around and redefined things so to include natural persons. Natural persons are corpses.
Oh, you look so natural. They look so natural lying there, right?
Right, exactly. Natural persons are corpses. And so they have included natural persons under their law. Okay. Okay, and copies of such patents certified. Certified is another giveaway. Certification is something that happens among units of government. Okay, so
Right.
the state of Alaska certifies their notary publics to the state of California. Okay, certification, including certified mail, is intragovernmental.
Right.
Okay, certified under the official seal of the Commissioner of the General Land Office of the United States. Well, interestingly, we never ceded any uh, large amounts of land to any entity called the United States with a small THE. Um, very small amounts of land were granted to this entity, and it was mainly, you know, public road easements, utility easements. This is what we're talking about again.
Correct.
And exemplifications of the record of the General Land Office of any patent recorded there may be recorded in the office of the county recorder of the county in which such lands or part thereof are situated. Okay, so they're talking about their patents, which are very limited, to land which they acquired via being granted it, okay, in the form of, say, a railroad easement or a road easement or a public utility easement.
Right.
This is what they're talking about from their perspective. We have our own system, okay, but they're not part of that system, and so they're not talking about it. And so when you're reading this, you have to understand where they're coming from and who they are, or it makes no sense. Our patents are based on the cadastral survey, which is an actual physical survey of the land. Okay, so our patents are ours and they pertain to our, what we consider to be our private property. From their perspective, it's public trust property. From our perspective, it's our private property. Okay, from their perspective, they own the patent on all of these road easements and electrical easements and so on and so forth. And they claim that, but that's of no concern to us. You know, as far as we're concerned, we gave them a road easement or we gave them a utility easement for the purpose stated and nothing more. Okay, so this sort of thing between what's public and what's private is sort of like a mirror. or maybe imagine a fence, you know, or a 2-lane road. If you look off to one side of the road, you're not seeing the other side, right?
Right.
It's the same way with things like this. They are describing land patents that they own in terms of them and their state, this United States or these United States, you see. And so they see it from this perspective, and we see it from that perspective. And we need to realize that this is what's going on. When they reference things like patents, they're talking about their patents. When they're talking about, like the Internal Revenue Code, we are only mentioned in the Internal Revenue Code as non-resident aliens.
That's correct.
Okay. So in the same way, when they're talking about their patents in this state, meaning their state, not these United States, those United States, then they're defining things according to how they organize and think of things, not
Right.
as we do. People have so much trouble with this concept and with making these demarcations, and I wish I could make it easier. People are, for example, focused on the constitutions, the constitutions, the constitutions. Our country isn't founded under the constitutions.
No.
Our federal subcontractors
Correct.
are founded under the constitutions, but we aren't. And so, this single-minded focus on the constitutions is appropriate for our foreign subcontractors because that's how they live and breathe and make their living.
Right.
It's not how we live and breathe and make our living.
Right. And only would it apply to us if we actually worked for them. It's how the Bill of Rights is how they're supposed to treat us while we were working for them. And, part of the confusion, I think, can definitely be cleared up in some of this by the assemblies teaching some of the terms, and being able to help people realize when they're reading along, just like you just did with what is being presented, just in the word person, when you read person or natural person, or if you know the definition of, or if you're watching the infinitive, if you're watching, all of those little clues that are written in the record. And I've had some people who pointed out when we've been reading some things, well, it says right there, the with a capital T. I said, yeah, that's at the beginning of the sentence, right?
Right.
They like to put it at the beginning of the sentence because then it obscures the fact that they can't use it in the middle of the sentence.
Right.
So,
and they say this state, they're making a clear demarcation between their state and some other state, right? Well, it turns out that the other state is our state,
right.
you see.
Right.
And so all of this confusion has been deliberate on their part, and they've made the most of it. And we need to be wise enough and determined enough to raise our hand and say, wait a minute, are you talking about those United States or these United States?
Right.
This state.
Right.
Okay. And actually, which state is being referenced? You'll find that 9 times out of 10, it will actually be a form or some sort of paperwork from the state of Nevada or the state of Wisconsin. It will not actually be from Wisconsin, for example. Right. So the actual form, when they're referencing this state, they're being duplicitous again because they're referring to the state of Arizona as if it were the state, and it's not.
Right.
It's a Confederate state, and so this constant deception of calling a Confederate state, like the state of Arizona, a state, is there to confuse the issues further. And we need to keep it straight in our minds that Arizona is the state, and the state of Arizona is a Confederate state, but that doesn't mean that it has all the same rights, nature, and prerogatives of a state.
Right, exactly. Layers. There's layers. So, as we talk about our land patent committees, how do you see our land patent committees functioning within our state assemblies?
I see our state land patent committees being a kind of a board of arbitration and a board that basically is confirming the existence of land parcels under patent in the state. So ultimately, when there are questions between people who are claiming a parcel of land, the board, the patent committee, I should say, would look at it in terms of the history of the property and the ownership of the property, and be able to see, okay, well, so-and-so had the proper chain of title, and they made their claim on the grant and patent, and there it is. Or there it isn't.
Right.
But we will have that capability of posting our patent interest in public, and that will help solve an awful lot. Ideally, we'll just clear the title system out, and people will own their land by patent or by grant, or both. And we won't have all of this stuff. All there'll be is a conveyance record back and forth. Mm-hmm. But we have to realize that, our entire purpose in obtaining a land title is not to continue the title process and system. Our purpose in obtaining quote unquote clear title to a piece of property is just the initial step of closing the chain of title and claiming the land patent and the underlying grant of land, so that we're standing there foursquare on our own 2 little feet, on our own piece of land, and our own piece of soil, and they can't say anything to us about it.
Right, exactly. So, and then of course, if we are also getting rid of or being able to verify our little corner of heaven, wherever that might be, without the public easements that we are paying the taxes on, that they're assuming as part of our property, then that also means that we are not paying those taxes, correct?
Well, right. If it's a private easement, it's us giving them an easement so that they can have a road there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If it's a public easement, it's them giving us the right to have a road there. And right. So it's, are you the employer or the employee? You have to have it straight in your own head, or they will confuse you every time and tax you for the loss. So when we give them a private easement so that they can punch through a road, okay, or we give them a private easement so that they can provide a utility service to our property, it's a private easement. It's not a public easement.
I see.
But they will try to interpret it as a public trust easement every single time, because from their side of it, everything is held in public trust. Mm-hmm. From our side of it, anything that's in trust is in a private trust.
Right. So I get it. So, I mean, it is kind of, it is a lot of people are just discovering that they don't actually own their land, that, they're just kind of given this little piece of paper for all that money they spent, or, we paid cash for our land,
Mhm.
and
All you bought was a title.
yeah, exactly.
Somebody
Exactly.
else's creative work describing your land.
So how do we go back then, if we've been defrauded all these years and spent our good hard-earned money, so to speak? How do we go back and make that lawful? Are we going to be required to, you know, put so much up in silver? Or are we going to have to, or is that going to be a moot and we're just going to go back and say, well, it was fraud and we were defrauded and it belongs to us anyhow?
Yeah, well, we are going to say that we were defrauded because we were, and that we were misrepresented in breach of trust and in bad faith because we were. And we're going to claim that they had filthy paws in commerce, which they do. And this entire system is going to go kablooey. I mean, it's fraud. It's been fraud ever since 1707 when uh, the entire War of the Spanish Succession and Queen Anne of Hanover and all the rest of the crap happened back in England. That's where it really went off track. And it's been off track for 300 years, over 300 years. And the Brits are entirely responsible for this.
Sure.
It's we are not the ones that did this.
Right.
We are the victims of this fraudulent system that they put in place, misrepresented, and then used as a means of surreptitious contracting throughout with their own people and with us. So the British government is due for a complete, total overhaul, and by its own people. They were promised a constitutional monarchy, and what they actually received was a territorial oligarchy instead. So, they have every right to come back on the quote unquote monarchy and on the government of Westminster and to say, you guys have been defrauding us under bait and switch conditions for over 300 years.
So, so let's go back to the committee. So they're going to act as a board. What can our land patent committees do in the meantime to get us ready for this switch over and eventually, assisting us maybe in the research of our land patents, or to be ready so that we've got our research, we've got our chain of conveyance, all set?
Well, hopefully we're going to wipe away the entire system, the foreign system of title.
Mm-hmm.
And, we'll just resolve those titles one by one. And the entire population of the state will then appear in the public record again. Now, we've set up this new basically land patent recording system for people that will make it much easier for them to do and much less expensive for them to do properly. And then each state will become aware of, that we have this new land patent recording system that we have access to. And, they can start incorporating the records from the land patent recording service as part of their land records in their state. And the committees can start working directly with that system so that when somebody posts a patent claim to a piece of property in Ohio, your land patent committee can look it up and say, oh yeah, and now it's been recorded here in Ohio by the person making the claim, and we can verify that yes, they own the patent to this property. And they can work with the land patent recording service to make sure that those land patent service recordings are also mirrored in Ohio.
Yeah, because we're going to have local notification of that. Otherwise, you're going to have some other frauds occur in terms of stealing your property. You know, that is a huge issue right now in many states where they're combing the recording offices for properties that have been paid for, where there is no mortgage. And then they're going through and creating fraudulent deeds of conveyance or bills of sale and registering them with the recording with the
and
county office.
That's why you need to have your own recording, prior recording, that you can stand on and say,
yep, here it is.
And by the way, that's no longer 4211 Mockingbird Lane. It's actually, 4711 Birchwood Road.
Right.
And here it is, right in the recording documents.
Right. I know,
so
when we bought our property, it was the post office that assigned our address, and I had a terrible disagreement with them over the number, because our road runs north to south. So the 80-acre farm that is north of me, its address was 1776. The 80-acre farm that is across the road from me, it was 2051, and I was right in the middle, right? So I thought, hey, we should be somewhere around 2000, right? No, they named us 2052. And I told him, I said, when I pointed it out, I said, they're 1776, they're 2051. You just made a 2052. The fire department's never going to be able to find us. The police department isn't going to know where we are. It's going to mess up our mail. And for 10 years, it messed up everything until they got used to, oh, yeah, they screwed the numbers up. So, yeah.
And it's just an arbitrary description of your land.
It is.
And so we cannot continue this situation. We have got to band together as landowners and say, okay, you're our employees. You are going to do it this way, and you're going to recognize that we are the actual owners of this property. You're not going to be telling us what to do. You're going to be serving us as you should. And so this is what it, this has been so horrendously mismanaged for so long, that you're dealing with contrary belief systems. And it's just belief. It has nothing to do with the actual law. It has nothing to do with the substantive law. And it has nothing to do with anything but how ignorant people really are. And, so what you have are a bunch of people that think they're doing the right thing when in fact they're doing the wrong thing. Right. You have public employees who've forgotten who they work for. You have a situation where your land is being misidentified as public trust land, when in fact it is your own privately owned parcel. So we all have this struggle to cut through the BS and to bring forward the crimes that have been committed, the frauds that have been committed against us, and the usurpations that have been committed against us, and the entire bait and switch. I mean, now think about this. How many Americans have grown up as the result of British propaganda thinking that they live in a democracy?
Oh, yeah. Oh, drives me crazy. Absolutely drives me crazy.
Yeah, that's the bait and switch here. We are guaranteed a republic, a Republican form of government. Okay.
And that's different than being a Republican.
Right, right,
It's
right.
kind of Republican.
Right, right. It has nothing to do with political parties.
No.
And it isn't a republic. It's Republican. It's the feminine form of the Latin. So we can be sure that the kind of government that we're guaranteed is based on living people. Okay.
Well,
So-
Anna, I've got a few questions out here. I'd like to move to that since we're, an hour in, and we'll answer some questions. So, oops, sorry, wrong one. Okay. So Margaret would like to know, could we change ownership of land from a corporation to a people or people? If so, how? So maybe you've got land that you bought and you put it in as an LLC instead of under a living people, maybe.
Well, it can be conveyed to a lawful person. There's no reason why not. It's just a matter of doing the conveyance.
Right. You'd have to maybe dissolve the LLC or convey it and then dissolve the LLC and be done with it, right?
Or just convey the land as an asset out of the ownership of the LLC. As
Okay.
a separate asset.
There you go. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Here's a question. Please explain, from Betty, please explain land held in torrens. How does one obtain land patent for land held in torrens?
Torrens is another trust. It's just another different kind of trust that was usually you see this in the former Spanish states like California, Arizona, and so on. And it's a royal trust. The land is not held in torrens in actual fact because the Spanish king granted all of that land to our United States. This is where you get into the entire flap over the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty and Trust. At the time that the Spanish king signed over all that land as a result of the Spanish-American War, which is basically 7 states worth of the country, right? He had the same situation that the British had, in that he had Spanish citizens living in this country, right? And their land went into the Royal Trust, just like the British citizenry's land went into the British Royal Trust, right?
Right.
Okay, so it's not really held in torrens unless you happen to be a Spanish citizen. Okay, so for example, think about this. You were one of the early Spanish families that came to California and received a land grant from the King of Spain, and you set up a ranch and hacienda on this land, and it's your land. I mean, the Spanish king actually granted this to your family, right? And now all of a sudden, the Spanish king has lost a war, and as a result, your land is being claimed by an entirely different government. I mean, where does that put you? And where does that put your land?
Right.
Well, you still have the possession of the land. You still have the right to use it and live there. But it's being held in trust for you as a Spanish citizen, right? In the same way that the British territorial citizenry has their land being held by a British trust, right?
Mhm.
for their benefit. Same exact system. But, if you're not a Spanish citizen and you're not somebody who's been there since the founding of the state prior to 1898 even, um, you know, it doesn't apply to you really.
Okay. All right. Great. This is a question and a term that comes up regularly. Does an allodial title help you get your property off the tax rolls? Well, I think everything that we've described today kind of um,
If it
points
says
towards.
if it says title, it's foreign.
Yeah,
Okay, it's that
yeah,
simple. A title is something that a king or a queen gives. If it's a title, it's foreign to us. We don't need it. We don't want it. We're not going to have it. In this situation, what we need is a system that is very simple and very honest. And so we're going to be cleaning up all of these fraudulent titles and all these uh, fraudulent conveyances and fraudulent land claims, and all this crap is going to go right out the window. We're going to establish who owns what, and then that's going to be done with. And we're going to just start fresh. This whole system is FUBAR. It
right.
has been for a long time.
Well, we were guaranteed um, at the founding of our country our right to private property. That's what's made us such a target over all the many years by the Brits, by the Spanish, by the French, is those property rights that have been given to us. If they
No,
could,
they weren't given to us. We fought for them and earned them.
yes, earn them. Correct. Right.
Okay. And
Right.
that really was under law of war. But now look at this situation. The Brits never fought us as a country. They fought us as a business. It was a mercenary enterprise for them, but it was not a mercenary enterprise for us.
Right.
So who comes out of it on top? We do. We did that ourselves. As you know, people fail to get the big important difference between our country and all these other countries. We are born free.
Right.
We are born owning our land as far as you
Right.
can see. Okay? And we don't owe anything to any government, period. We don't owe anything to the British King. We don't owe anything to the Pope. We don't owe anything to anybody. Okay? And we never have. And we still don't. We're still the preferential and priority creditors of the Western world. We have paid for every goddamn thing you can think of
Right.
and paid twice and
Twice
15,
or three
52
times.
times for it.
Right.
So it's not as if, when you actually look at the financial records, it is the height of complete idiocy to believe that we have any kind of national debt at all. We do not have a national debt. What we've got are crooked bookkeepers.
Right. That's exactly it. That's a great way to put it. So, but that's also why in our gain of our private property that we are such a target, and have always been such a target.
Well, why should it be? Why shouldn't the other people wake up and say, hey, we own this, not you?
I think
You
they are.
know?
I think they are.
Well,
And
and that's
very
what
much
has to
thanks to
happen.
you and everybody else, in the entire, I think they are. They're beginning to realize that those people that they've put on those platforms are there to enslave them, not just guide them or lead them. That they put them on a platform and they've bowed to them, and they didn't realize that they were subjecting everything themselves, their property, everything to them. And so, I think it's one of those things that when we realize that and we can get behind that, again, getting our state assemblies up and working is the way we can be actively involved in changing and assisting in the change between this system and ours, or this system and that we're currently under, and our freedom, our complete freedom, our
Right.
financial freedom, everything.
Right. So
Right.
this is what we all need to do and realize and join together to do and to enforce this on our employees. I mean, they are our employees. They are taking their paychecks out of our pockets, okay? And the whole idea that we should be taking orders from our public employees is ridiculous. We should be giving them their marching orders, and they should be doing the work according to our directions. And that's what's been lacking. You know, we walked out and left the store in the control of our employees, and this is what we have. You know, 160 years later, they've taken over and they think they own it.
Right.
Well, they don't, but they think they do. And at this point, it's up to us to convince them otherwise.
Correct. Correct. Yep. That's very true. So, so yes, I don't have any other questions for today, Anna. And again, well, I know, but it's so important being active within our assemblies and whatever committees that we can be and do, being active in getting our Jural assemblies and their committees up and working is only going to help all of our states stand up and be ready to assume the business that we have to assume.
Right.
Because where we got to where we're at is because everybody got complacent. They let somebody else do it. They were lulled to sleep,
Yes.
And so, I realize we've got the big football game coming up, and that's the it's a great thing, but we can't let those things lull us to sleep any longer. We have to continue that fight, and we have to continue working on our assemblies to get to the point where we can be financially free, have our property free, and us to be free on the land.
Right.
So yeah,
upward and onward, kids.
upward and onward. And I'm going to do a little shameless promotion while we're here, because we have been talking on Ohio, beginning to get our events committee really in gear for the American States Family Reunion, September 15th, 10th through the 15th this year. There is a link there on Eventbrite for the getting reservations. And because this is taking place on a little island in Ohio, there is going to be limited hotel rooms. And we're already starting to contact the hotels to see what we need to do to get a block. And so if anybody out there is listening and they want to get a reservation, as soon as we open up and give the information for reservations, you better be getting yourself a hotel room. Because otherwise you're going to be commuting back and forth every day on a ferry. So from the mainland, if you can get a room over there, because it's a very popular time of the year, believe it or not. And beautiful weather usually, all of those things. So, we need to make sure that we're getting that information out there. Again, it's going to be September 10th through the 15th, 2025. The information is on https www.eventbookings.com, or just go to eventbookings.com and search for the American State Assembly's Family Reunion. Okay.
I really, really, I envy everyone who has the, freedom to participate in this and know that they can go, or be reasonably sure that they can go to Ohio during these dates. I unfortunately don't have that because my schedule is subject to change without notice and goes all over this God's green earth at any moment. Okay.
Right.
So But just the idea of having a family reunion and everybody getting together and learning more about your history and learning more about um, how each piece and part fits together. It's such a wonderful opportunity, and I just I think it's a wonderful thing that this has been started, and I hope that it will continue far into the future. And maybe someday, in addition to a day of Thanksgiving, we'll have a day of family reunion.
So with along with this, what we're talking about is being able to offer little seminars. So for a couple of days, having a couple of educational and gaining anybody that would like to make presentations to be able to actually have a little conference schedule with this year, not just the general talks that we had last fall while we were in Plymouth. And so, along with a little sightseeing, a little fun, a little, um, a little relationship building between all of us
Mhm.
across all our states. So, I hope that you're going to put it on your calendars. If you can possibly make it, then it's in Northern Ohio, up in Lake Erie, on the island of Put-in-Bay, South Bass Island. And Anna, I'm holding out for the hopes that maybe, just maybe, you might be able to make it, even if it's for a day or so.
I would
Um,
love to.
and so I have special plans for that just in case. Got contingency planning, and we'll be able to talk about that a little sooner that we get to that point. So,
Well,
any
people aren't aware of the history of Ohio. So
yeah,
you've got a great opportunity to teach them some things that will leave them with their jaws going, I never knew that.
right,
Ohio was once the frontier,
that's right.
and Ohio had a critical role in the Revolutionary War.
Mhm.
I know, but anyone who uh, didn't grow up in Ohio probably doesn't know that. So
Right.
it's going to be great.
First truly American state, not a colony. So, yes, so, Ohio has a lot of those, of course, we always tease here on Ohio that Ohio has Ohio, the heart of it all. Of course, we always say it's the heart of all the corruption. It was,
No, Indiana's got you beat. Forget
oh,
it. Illinois and Indiana
oh
both.
no, we had corporate presidents from Ohio. So,
Well, that's true. That's true.
so
And Ohio has a really fascinating and crucial history that you'll have an opportunity to share there at that family reunion. And I'm sure that people will come away much wiser in terms of understanding how the Northwest Ordinance works,
mhm.
how the organic laws are actually structured. Um, and I just think it's a wonderful opportunity. I think people will um, be fascinated and just have a glorious time.
Right. So go to www.eventbookings.com and look up the American State Assembly's Family Reunion 2025.
You
So,
know what? I would really get out there too and get Ohioans, just rank and file people from the public invited because this is their state. And to the extent that they learn more about their state, their history, and how that fits in American history, many, many more of them will be inspired to join their state assembly. And
right.
so I think it's a great outreach opportunity for you.
Well, we're hoping to have that same weekend is the historic weekend on the island. So there is an 1812 encampment on the Peace Memorial's grounds, the
Oh,
International Peace
wow.
Memorial grounds. They'll do
Wow.
special presentations at the Museum Center for the International Peace Memorial, and and then with that they have in the downtown of Put-in-Bay, they have an art in the park that weekend, and just kind of a general on that Saturday. So we're hoping to go ahead and get a booth, an outreach booth, and do outreach during that and have Ohioans man that outreach so that as we're all walking around with our t-shirts and things, that maybe we can do a little bit of that public outreach on Put-in-Bay. So we're very excited.
Yeah.
We're starting to form those plans and get those things ready and you know, hopefully encourage the other states who come to join us in that outreach. And it just isn't Ohio's booth. It'll be, opportunity for them because we get people from all over the country coming there in the summer, and especially for that weekend. So, yes.
Well, it should be glorious, and as you say, the weather should have cooled down, and some of the humidity should have slacked off. It should be a very nice atmosphere, and that part of Ohio, that time of year is magic. So you should have everything, the best of all of the elements should be there, and I'm just envisioning a glorious time for everybody.
All right, great. Well, Anna, I think that does it for today. I'll give your voice a little bit of a break, a few minutes break. I know it's been tough. I'm glad you're getting over it, though. So me too. And, we will see you next week and we'll venture into the Jural Assembly, right? So,
Sally Ford.
yeah, there you go. It's exactly it. Well, have a nice week, everyone. Be watching for those. You heard it here first for banking, our prosperity unions opening. So keep watching.
That's it.
Yep. All
That's
right.
it. Here we go.
Here we go. All right. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.